You are watching
Even
Xirtus.
if the vilest sinner, this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 30. It's a 3-hour Gita read every day. Will save your life. Even if the vilest sinner worships me with exclusive devotion, they are to be considered righteous because they have made the proper resolve. Right? So let's say like you're a demon, even not even just a human. Even if you're a demon that does nothing but sin and you're evil, if what you're doing then is you start worshiping, and by worshiping the Lord, that actually means like to do good, essentially, right? Like it's to show love
That
for
sounds straight out of
reality.
Jesus.
Totally, it's actually pretty much Christianity, and this
Yeah,
idea
Colin,
that
I've
if
been
you're
telling you to
saving
read.
people's lives, and say it again, was it?
Sorry, I've been I remember like a few weeks ago I was trying to convince Colin to read the Bhagavad Gita as we're
Oh,
debating Bible knowledge.
dude,
Oh, bro,
you
I
should
read all the
definitely.
stuff. I read all of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, but
Any
Colin's a Jesus
religious
boy.
text, I'm all up on it. Like I'm like Mr. World Religion. I've been studying the world religions
I mean,
for a
I think
long time.
Colin, I think you do kind of have like a Christian bent, which is fine. Like, I really want to like
Oh, dude, yeah, yeah.
explore. I want to
No, I
explore this.
love the Jesus
I know I want to explore
foremost.
this idea where it's like if you take all the actual religions to their conclusion, where it's not like learning so much as having the ability to embody the values, like the true values of said religion, you end up in the same fucking
Yeah.
place,
Why?
right?
Very similar, yeah. I mean, they
Some of
all
them
are
are. I don't think. I
about
don't think
right
every.
action.
I don't think every religion is actually. That's what's cool. There's a lot of religions. So first off, most religions are the same religion. That is true. Like
I mean, I
they're
don't mean to
not
say
just.
it's the
They're not
same
just.
religion.
No,
I
but
just mean, what are they
I
all telling you to do? Like, don't drink, don't have extramarital sex,
look
don't
into
kill
Satanism
people.
and tell me that Satanism has the same goals as Christianity.
I don't
It's
know
not.
anything about Satanism.
Satanism
What?
is to worship the
Yeah, that's
self.
a little
Right?
different.
Well, Satanism rules the 9 laws of Satanism. It's like focus on let's see, click on the 11 rules of Satanism, and then the sins, the satanic sins, the 9 satanic sins. Okay, first off, the 11. All right, before I get into that, let me just preface this by the point I was trying to make. Most religions are the same religion because Judaism, Islam, Christianity, these are the Abrahamic faith. Now, there are different ways of looking at that, whether or not Christ was a new religion. But if you think Christianity is a new religion, you're not listening to Christ, because what he said was he came to restore the religion. So for him, it's that Judaism got kind of off to the side there. He brings it back to where it was originally. That's his belief. If you don't believe that, that's fine, but that means you're not a Christian. And that's okay. You don't have to be a Christian. I'm just saying what Christianity is supposed to be is it's the restoration of the ancient practice, the most ancient practice, going back to Adam and Eve, right? They're supposed to be like God talked to the
Yeah, I
first
came not
humans and told them how to
think
live
I
their lives.
came not to destroy the law, but to restore it, or whatever,
Totally. So in other
something like
words,
that.
he's saying that the Jewish law has kind of deviated a bit. All right. But then Muslims say, hey, Christians have got off the rails. You look at the 300 AD, you got Paul's murdering all of these Christians. Paul in the Bible, in Acts, you've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but then you have John is, John the physician. He didn't know Jesus. He was friends with Paul. Paul was Saul, right? Saul was this dude who's a lawyer and
Right. He
he
was a
killed.
mass murderer of Christians.
He's like Stalin for the early Christians. Yeah, he was responsible for anyone who ever witnessed Jesus. He was like, put him to death. And this is what the word witness, actually, the word for witness is martyr. We think martyr means dude who was murdered by Paul, or dude who was murdered for believing in Jesus. No, dude who was murdered is just the way we look at it now, because all of the witnesses, martyrs, were in fact murdered, right? So the original Christians, after so you got Deuteronomist reforms in Josiah, and they start killing everybody who doesn't practice their way. So the Jews end up having the Essenes, let me look at that up really quickly for you. Essenes are the group that Mary Magdalene was part of, and they were secretly, these Essenes were still practicing the law of the way that the second temple, before this, the fall of the second temple, were practicing the law. So for instance, they still worship the wife of God. They were considered a mystical Jewish sect. They accepted all of the different parts of the old Jewish religion. And so Christ being married to Mary Magdalene, or friends with her, or whatever you want to believe, right? That led to the restoration of the old way. Okay. But then he's showing people what to do. He gets murdered for his restoration of the law. That's basically the death of Jesus is the end of his. He was teaching people how to live a certain way. They stop him from doing that, and then anybody who was like, "Hey, this is how Jesus," I met that guy. He told me how to live my life. You should live that way too. They murdered all of those people. So there's this apostasy that happens where all of a sudden we don't know exactly what Jesus was doing. We have some books, but again, a lot of these books are completely rewritten and changed with the Qumran documents that they use to cite the Jesus. They're like, wow, Jesus said all of these things in the Bible. Well, these are from another book called the Qumran document, which is interlaced into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which were, by the way, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are at least anonymous gospels. They don't say written by Matthew or written by Mark or written by Luke. None of that. We just say, well, it could be Mark. It could be
probably,
Matthew.
Judging from the way it's written and the style of it, it's probably this dude.
But it's also probably not written till what, 90 or 120 AD, maybe at least 70 AD for most of this stuff. But that's assuming that, because we're talking about Polycarp, and Polycarp was supposedly born early enough to have known John, and they think John died before 105 AD. But according to the Bible, there's no evidence that John died ever. Mormons believe that John is still alive. I mean, it's, again, religion. It's like a comic book. You can believe what you want to believe. I'm just saying the history of the church. So not to get too deep into that, the point is Paul leads to the Tertullian and Origen and the Nicene Council, the Council of Antioch, etc., the Essenian creeds, and the Muslims say, hey, this is not what Jesus was teaching. So the Muslims take what they know about Judaism and what they know about Ishmael and Esau and this whole belief structure, and they say this is really, Jesus was a rabbi, which is what the Ebionites believed. And he was a prophet, and so that Muslims have Muhammad, peace be upon him, because he was a prophet. So, but you're still talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and Mormonism. All these things these are mostly, and there's thousands of different kinds of Christianity, etc. These are all just one Abrahamic religion that have got different nuanced views on what you're supposed to do about that religion. Okay, and then this is the other thing. All of those religions are coming from this belief that there was a flood, which we now know there was a flood at some point. Most history everywhere, Korea has a flood myth. Africa has their flood myths. The Akan with their spider and everything. The flood myth is that Noah had a bunch of kids, and the kids inherit the earth after Noah. Noah's kids have wives, and then this is why the Bible constantly talks about different nations or different family lines that come out of Noah, because you have different nations and ethnicities that occur. So you have like the Jews, but you also have the Indians, right? St. Thomas goes to see Shem's kids. St. Thomas, the descendants of Shem, the son of Noah. Oh, it's the family. It's good to see you. What's up? What's up, family? Yeah, fair. So so the point is, right. Hinduism then comes from the same line then that Christianity or Judaism and Christianity, they come from the same line that Hinduism comes from. If you go back to this deluge, this flood myth story. So I'm
sorry, what were you saying about the flood, the deluge?
Well, so out of the flood, you get Judaism and you get Hinduism and you get African religions and you get South American religions. Like these are all supposedly coming from this one origin point. But even like Persian beliefs versus Indian beliefs, there's the idea of the Asuras versus the Asuras. So the difference between them is you're supposed to worship them in one of the religions and you're not supposed to worship them in the other religion. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But they're basically about the same thing. These like supernatural deities that we're interacting with. So even getting beyond that, then you have this idea of Prometheanism. And so Prometheanism might be the main difference. If you get to the primordial religion point, it's like, do you worship God or do you fight God for your freedom? And most of these Western and Eastern religions, not the Middle Eastern one, the Middle Eastern one being Zoroastrianism, and most of these beliefs that center around Prometheus.
I still think there's a way to reconcile that, and this is going to be like a little hermetic sounding, I guess, but this goes back to the concept of like as above, so below, and how meta you're willing to go. Like if we say like, are you willing to go against God to fight for your freedom as a human being on this earth who wasn't asked to be born, or are you going to live in service of something bigger than you that you're a part of inevitably? And like, I remember one time we were comparing like the Übermensch, like Nietzsche's Übermensch versus Kierkegaard's Knight of Faith. And
right.
that's it. Yeah, it is kind of, you could see that example in every individual. And I always say,
that's
like,
the dilemma. Yeah.
If your life is like in the pooper, like down in the dumps, and you're dealing with like a lot of stuff, you should tap into the Übermensch. Like, you should say, like, nah, God has nothing to do with this. This is all me. Like, I have to tap into my own will as a human to get myself out of this shit. Right. But then after life is good, after you secure that post-scarcity abundance and you've done your stuff, you fought that war, then you got to go to God. Then you have to give it up, because otherwise you're just going to repeat that cycle. You're going to get lost.
Showing Mr. Beast for no reason whatsoever. Right. Exactly.